This is Shane Davis from Youngstown State University here with Figure It Out Baseball. Today I want to follow up a couple of my videos that I've dealt with, ball release and my catch play series. I want to follow that up today with a little talk about fastball grips and throwing your fastball. No matter what age you are, I think the fastball is the foundation for 99.99% of pitchers. It should be your bread and butter. It should be, especially at lower levels, the one pitch that you know I can always go to and I'm going to get it, one, for a strike, and two, hopefully where I want, whenever I want to do it. There are a couple variations with your fastball, but I'm going to start just showing you a four-seam grip. I'm using my Youngstown State baseball. These are actually our game balls this year, but using a four-seam grip, you have a seam, basically one continuous seam that goes around the baseball. So using a four-seam grip, I am gripping across here, across here, across here, however you want to do it. And the reason they call it four seams is I release. Now, if you see, my fingers are on the top side of the Y. So I release the baseball. There's seam 1. There's seam 2. There's seam 3. And there's seam 4 on top of the Y. And that's why we call it a four-seam baseball, or four-seam fastball. Typically, this is going to be your harder thrown baseball. It's also going to be the one that's going to stay the straightest. So if you're a younger player, just really picking up the game, picking up pitching, master throwing a four-seam fastball before we do anything else. Another couple common mistakes that I see with fastball grips are, now this is pertaining a little bit more to older guys. Younger guys, your 5, 6, 7-year-olds, their fingers aren't big enough to grip a baseball properly. So those guys, it's okay to grip with 3 fingers. It's okay to palm it. Most important thing is to get the baseball there. I'm talking more for, 12 and up, definitely once you get closer to high school. Couple common mistakes I see is guys will throw, even though they've got these 2 seams on top, guys are going to get, let this ring finger kind of dangle a little bit. Other common mistake is guys are going to choke it a little bit more than they should. One thing to keep in mind when you're throwing is you want to have a little bit of space in between here. And the reason being there is that the more points of your skin that are on the baseball, the slower it's going to go, because there's friction and it's going to be slower getting out of your hand. More points of contact equals more friction, which equals slower baseball. Which brings me to my second point. If you're just learning how to pitch, probably the easiest way and most controllable way to learn how to throw a changeup or subtract off of a fastball, rather than tinkering too much with throwing circle changes or palm balls or anything like that, just take your fastball grip from being out here on your fingers a little bit and choke it down some, and that'll take a little bit of velocity off of the baseball and simulate your fastball where it's a little bit easier to repeat because it's basically the same grip for 2 pitches. Now, moving on, 2-seam fastball is going to move usually towards your arm side, although I've seen guys that have tried throwing 2 seams, and usually because of where your thumb is at. By the way, on my 4-seam fastball, my thumb is basically underneath the baseball in between my middle and pointer fingers. With the 2-seam baseball, it's basically just reversed. I could go here. I've had pitchers that go across these 2 seams right here. I've had guys that go across this little horseshoe here. Really, whatever you're comfortable with, and tinker with it and see what gets a little bit of that arm side movement. But kind of how I talked about, getting 4 seams this way. If I'm throwing the baseball, we'll say I'm throwing like this. If I'm throwing the baseball here, I've got these 2 seams by the NCAA. Still 2 seams, back to 2 seams. And that ball, because of the wind and resistance cutting across these seams rather than being perpendicular to it, because of the parallel, it's usually going to take off. Another way to manipulate with this, you're going to want to make sure that your thumb is definitely underneath there. Usually the higher you come up towards your index finger, the more you're going to be able to cut the ball based on pressure. You also want equal pressure, roughly, on both of your fingers, and on your thumbs, kind of just there as a guide. If I had, I'll ask guys a lot, usually with breaking balls, but I'll ask guys 1 to 10, how much pressure do you have on your middle finger? And they may say 8. On this, if this finger has a 6 pressure, should be basically this with a 6 pressure. Again, fastball is our building block. Fastball is the pitch that we should master, or at least approach mastering before we start moving on to other things. There are guys that are successful pitching with only fastballs or primarily fastballs. Definitely as you're getting younger, because as you get younger, this is the one pitch, the fastball, that you're always going to have with you, that's always going to be called for you. So it makes sense as you're younger, as you're a younger player, let's master throwing a fastball. This has been Shane Davis from Youngstown State University here with Figure It Out Baseball. Thanks for joining me in our little talk about fastballs, fastball grips, and pitching with your fastball. Please join me in my next video where I talk about change-ups and change-up grips and how to approach throwing your change-up.